This call
But
is now being.
But if anybody has an objection to it, I completely understand.
It's fine. On my part.
Totally fine with me.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Totally
the call is being recorded, and I will distribute that recording after the magic happens in the cloud. So probably tomorrow morning I'll have it out to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Back to you, Karen.
Okay. So one of the main products that our collaborative works on is this platform called Acceladapt, which we provide various cities. We've worked with a handful of southeastern cities, from Asheville to West Palm Beach to Tallahassee, the 6 jurisdictional collaborative in the Triangle region. We're about to start working with Charleston. And we're basically delivering this software solution, Esri-based, to deliver the vulnerability and risk assessment data that we do with them over about a course of a year, kind of through our various consulting, And so Acceladapt is something that essentially, again, is covers a wide range of climate threats, and allows the municipality and the community to be able to interpret and understand where in their city certain assets are most vulnerable and most at risk to these particular threats, and be able to let them kind of interrogate it, spatially see where those areas are, where those neighborhoods are. But from the equity viewpoint, is one part of this product is that we have an additional filter looking at various additional socioeconomic data. So if one particular area of the of say Asheville has been determined already kind of a high risk and high vulnerable to flooding, there's additional data that we use as filters to determine, as the community there, are they underemployed? Are they, a certain age? Various metrics that we use from both Census and the American Community Survey to just basically do additional filter to kind of learn more about those vulnerable areas, and so that those cities can target them. Because oftentimes a lot of the communities, one of the first things that they ask for is, essentially, how are we going to, move forward, be resilient in an with equitable strategies, and find and be, fair and just for our vulnerable populations. And so it's kind of an additional component to the software that we've been building. So we're kind of coming into it is that, I myself am not an equity expert whatsoever, but the products that we're building for our clients provide kind of this extra lens of at least looking at some of the, readily accessible data to help them kind of interpret some of the information that we have.
And I guess, Karen, in your experience as the service provider, are you finding that you're providing that because the market is asking for it? It's really in response to what you hear your clients requesting, the clients being the cities?
Yes. So far it's been high on their list of something that they're really interested in. With the communities that we've been interested, they oftentimes certain neighborhoods they're already paying special attention to, and really do want to know where they fall within the assessment, the vulnerability assessment that we're doing. And it's oftentimes a criteria for them to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can't remember who I said I was going to go to next. I hope the 513 number, because that's the one that I see next on the list.
Hey, this is Bridget, and I am working as one of the grantees of the Southeast Sustainable Communities Fund, which Meg, I believe, is talking about on this panel as well. And what we are doing is implementing a low-income weatherization program where we're trying to look at all the existing resources we have through like federal weatherization assistance money, as well as the heating and cooling assistance funding, and saying, what are the things that we need to do? Why aren't people qualifying to use some of these services? And how can we use some unrestricted funding to get people to either qualify for a deeper retrofit so we can take a whole home approach, or like how can we add to what is happening already to enable that kind of whole house approach. And so I'll say one thing is that we tried to take a super data-driven approach, and we found a lot of barriers to accessibility and people's ability to participate. And so we actually removed kind of that approach and removed some of those barriers to say, we're just going to look at income and kind of the quality of your home and see what we can do to kind of provide service, and then look at some more data on the back end to see, you know, how effective different strategies are. And so, and one thing that we found is that a lot of, you know, we're not even always taking full advantage of some of the federal assistance dollars or some of the utility dollars that are available because of life and safety issues in the home. And so we were able to work with our amazing grant funders to say, what can we do to shift some of this money from traditionally, you know, from HVAC systems and insulation to mold remediation, roof repair, and some of these other services so that we could get people in the queue. And I think that's, you know, addressing an equity issue of, you know, life and safety, you know, should come first, right? That's important, as well as energy efficiency and the climate and the environmental impacts that come along with it. And so trying to marry those two things together.
So I'm thinking about the scale and how this conversation could flow. You're really thinking about this at the very specific household level, but of course bringing to bear resources that include technology solutions, policy solutions, funding solutions, but working at, you know, at the level of the home. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say the way that we're seeing at scale potentially is that we're coordinating with another program in Raleigh to use a similar intake structure and utility release structure. So I guess we can see it scaling in other parts within our utility territory in our state, but yes, otherwise at the home level.
Okay. As I'm thinking about this session and our time that we have, there's some aspects of this question that I think we're probably going to have a harder time talking about, like talking about technologies, talking about equity, talking about scaling are all things that you could spend an hour on. So it might be actually like, what does it look like to be integrating equity and technology at a variety of scales? And then a conversation across the five of you of what would be ways that at each place where you work at each level, there could be better integration. It's just a thought, like kind of as I'm listening to the topic. So let's go to 423. I think that must be Meg.
Yeah, that's Meg. So yeah, so speaking of scale, so Meg Jamieson, I'm the director of the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, and we have the Southeast Sustainable Communities Fund. So that's a lot of yada, yada, yada. But so we are funding Bridget, as well as lots of other folks in the Southeast, to do her project, which is related to energy efficiency. But the project, the program, the SSCF Grant Fund, actually funds projects that are related to either energy or water. And they all have to have a focus on creating equitable outcomes for the communities where they're working, where folks are working. The other key thing, I guess, speaking of scale, is that we are a regional network, and we are regionally funding projects from anywhere all the way as west as Arkansas down to Florida and up to the North Carolina, Tennessee borders. So the idea is that we are creating on the ground proofs of concept that can be scaled and can be shared within our network. So we have the SSDN network actually has about 45 different communities that are a part of the network. And the idea is that, as Bridget mentioned, she's able to put some boots on the ground and come up with a new project in her community, but she's also able to share that with Raleigh, she's also able to share that with Little Rock, Arkansas, and Birmingham, Alabama, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So there's a lot of opportunity for that scaling to happen. But the idea for our grant program, which I think I probably need to talk the least of the group, but just teeing up Bridget maybe, is that she's a part of something bigger that we're trying to create proofs of concept where local governments can work in community partnerships on the ground to create solutions for climate change that empowers residents and creates longer lasting opportunities for them to be more resilient and sustainable. There's also the conversation about policy, which is really great if there's a policy outcome, and in some there is and in some there isn't. But there's, you know, in terms of the technology piece, like really we have a couple of different opportunities to share where folks have, you know, some folks are working on green infrastructure projects and some folks are working on energy efficiency projects. And I would say there isn't really anything super innovative in the technology, but the application and the approach is the innovative piece, and putting, you know, seemingly traditional energy efficiency or weatherization technologies or green infrastructure techniques to work, and really building the capacity within the community to actually do it themselves. So with workforce development projects or with education and training programs for youth, that's where the technology starts to bleed into the community and equip those folks with additional skills. That's all I'll say. I don't know how we want to weave that in, but I would say that maybe having me tee something up before Bridget talks would be probably good enough, maybe sufficient.
Okay, thanks, Meg. Yeah, I could see this being a nice kind of a, you know, I'm almost like, maybe you could just be the moderator.
No,
I won't talk about
a moderator.
but I mean, I think that would fit given your relationship, and with NEMAC also operating primarily, I think, in this.
Oh yeah,
Southeast.
And our network has worked with NEMAC in the past several times. So we love you. We love you guys.
We love you too.
All right. And Nikisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikisha Glover, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I consider myself a climate justice organizer, and I've been able to go on a journey where ultimately has set me on a path to launch my own nonprofit. And the nonprofit is called Soul Nation. It's spelled SOL. So when you read it, it's the power of the sun. When you, when you read it, it's the power of the sun. When you hear it, it's the power of our hearts and mind. And what we try to do with our organization and my work is to organize around solutions. So how do we equip communities with training and resources and provide and amplify pathways to solutions to a more sustainable economy? And so we look at it through a lens of, I guess you could say we have some programmatic elements. One is soul stories. We got to give people platforms to tell their own stories. We do believe that communities should own their own solutions. That's another big piece for us. But so there's soul stories, which are stories of strength, resiliency, and solutions. We not only do we tell about solutions, but there are some solutions that we choose to pull out and organize around specifically based on whatever our capacity is, if those are things that we can do. Then our our third program element would be the Soul Collective, and understanding that we need everybody operating in their gifts and strengths and their talent. We need the artist, the teacher, the preacher. We need the students, we need the singer, the poet. We need everybody operating in whatever their gift or strength or talent is to really organize around whatever the issue is, to bring forth your talent and your gifts so that we can create the solutions that can be sustainable and long lasting. And so that's kind of Soul Nation in overview for you all. Again, we're a climate justice-based organization where we see and we work through the intersection of the environmental movement and the social justice movement. They both need each other because they continue to impact the same communities. The same communities are being devastated by access to clean water and clean air, are the same communities that are facing racial injustice and food access and a lot of these different elements. So we just work through translating these issues. And a lot of times what happens is, from the environmental perspective, the impacts are slower to see than the things that happen on the social justice side. But again, they continue to impact the same community. So we have to look at it from a holistic approach. We are actually in the midst of planning for an upcoming summit. So I'll be leaving the Climate Con, headed back to Charlotte for a summit that we're going to have here in Charlotte. On just to make note of one other component, because we're talking about tech and adaptation. One thing I can appreciate about adaptation prior to getting the Soul Nation nonprofit off the ground is learning about just the work in adaptation that has been happening for years. And I love it from the sense that the adaptation approach recognizes that the climate has changed and people are being impacted today. And how do we utilize that knowledge to build a community that's resilient and can withstand a change in climate and the things that are happening, at the same time mitigating for the change in climate through policy and legislature and whatnot. So I can appreciate that aspect and approach to adaptation through some of the work that I've done. I have a long history in a number of different things. You'll get me talking about insurance. I spent years in insurance, but it's nice to be able to talk about the thing that I love about my approach in the work with climate justice is because there's nothing like pretty much every experience that I have had or will have, I can connect it back to climate justice in some way when we start with the definition of what climate is. Climate, by definition, if you look it up, is the condition of, like look up any dictionary, it means the condition of. So that gives me the translation and the language that I need to be able to talk about not only the condition of our weather patterns, I can also talk about the condition of our schools and how that's connected. I can talk about the condition of our economy as well as the condition of the air quality that we're faced with. So I'm giving you that information and just to kind of let you know that's where my work is rooted. And one more element that I want to pull out is in my freelance and consulting work that I do. I work for Girls Who Code. So that brings in the tech aspect to the lens of work that I have as well. I operate as their regional partnership coordinator for North and South Carolina. So I help get free clubs launched across North Carolina and South Carolina, as well as recruit 10th and 11th grade girls to our summer immersion program. Now, the last connecting point that I want to share with you is back under Soul Nation, when I was explaining to you about the solutions component of which we operate. One of the solutions that we choose to organize around is technology. We see technology as a solution. And how do we equip our communities with training and resources so that they can own their own solutions? And so one of our first endeavors in that has been to launch our own Girls Who Code Club, but we are looking for other resources that provide free training or free resources to communities so that they can own their own solutions around technology.
That's great. Oh, thank you. That I think that the story and the voice of communities who are often impacted and then frequently expected to accept a solution that comes from outside is a model that needs to change, and there's a conversation about that need, but a less understanding of how do we achieve that. And I would love to hear now as part of our kind of knowing each other, and then in the panel too, like what are those steps that Soul Nation sees to ensuring that, we often say communities have a voice at the table, but it's not about being a voice. It's about like, this is our table, this will be our table. Like, you're going to come to our table, and how do you ensure that these processes start there and end there, so that the conversation is based where the community is, and that they are creating, developing, and then owning the solutions.
So you bring up a very, very good question. So a lot of it is definitely the access to, well, first off, leading with the community's needs first. Like you said, a lot of times solutions come from the outside, and it's a perceived solution, or it's a solution to a perceived issue. Whereas the community is focused on other issues, like, okay, I need to get food on the table today, or maybe I'm worried about like where my child is being sent off to school and whatnot. Like, being able to lead with, how can I address your issue and help support you? How do I allow you to lead, and then support you with saying, hey, by the way, not only can you do what you're doing in that approach for creating a solution to the issues that you're faced with right now, immediate. Maybe if we look at it from this lens of sustainability, I can show you the economic benefits of it as well. So being able to support and strengthen what they're already working on. So I do believe in like being able to offer support, and it takes a lot of listening also. So coming in from a listening approach from the community knows what they need. A lot of times it's just, how do you get the resources to the community, because you have a lot of organizations that have figured out the language to be able to represent a community, but sometimes those dollars and funds don't always get to where it's intended to go. So those are some bigger conversations to have around putting a infrastructure in place. And I think that would be what I would close on, is like creating the infrastructure so a community can identify their issues and be able to own the solutions, and being able to see the issues as an opportunity for economic benefit, for health benefit, for benefit in general for the community.
Excellent. Okay, do you all have questions for one another? You all heard the same intro that obviously we're all here together. Are there questions across the group?
Sure, I have one, and like this stems from my own challenges too in this work, and a lot of it working in like a lot of infrastructure and things around stormwater is that there's not a lot of metrics to actually measure how efficient something is actually performing, or how effective those measures are. And I'm curious if there's similar challenges like that, or if there are existing metrics in terms of how other people in this group look at how effective the work that they're doing is on the communities that they're working with.
That's a big topic for us that we've been talking a lot about lately. The evaluation portion of, we find ourselves kind of working with communities kind of at the front end. They're just becoming aware of some of these issues and just starting to say, we need to be resilient. And so, as we work through that with them, they kind of start to identify really and target what some of their issues are. They haven't even put any strategy in place yet to measure, to evaluate, to understand if it's even worth doing in the long run. That's a big one that I think for us has been a lot of discussion yet, but we haven't mastered it yet. We don't have, it's definitely part of our vision, but I feel like we're just so early, so, it's various communities are different and at different stages of their planning for certain things as well. But I don't know about anyone else.
I think in some ways it ties to something that Keisha said, and I've been saying, is that if there's a silver lining to the inaction of climate change that we've all suffered, is that we're now in the thick of it. So there's no more waiting to find out whether or not your strategy is going to be effective. There's been this narrative that we'll have to wait 30 years to find out whether or not there's an avoided loss. Well, guess what? You're not going to have to wait 30 years to find out if there's an avoided loss, because there probably is going to be a 100-year storm happening multiple times over the next 5 to 10 years. Right. It is not the way that we should have come to being able to evaluate our success at these strategies, but it is where we are. And it is, like that's what we have, that's kind of where we're working now. So I think that we have more of an opportunity for that metric evaluation.
Yeah.
Nikisa, if you're trying to be on our call, I know you're on 2 calls at once, which is amazing. It's something I've always wondered if I could achieve myself. I think her camera's off now. She's on mute, so she tried doing that other activity. But other thoughts about this kind of metrics and the ways that how others are tackling metrics of success, and what it is that you might be wishing you could measure.
I mean, I'll say from the cities, from our perspective, there's software and tools to figure out like the impact we're having on our peak demand, and that was kind of the driver behind this conversation. But I think the metrics that we've realized are more important are building relationships and trust with the community, and to get to that place where people are coming with us and saying, yeah, this is what we want, or, we do want this in our community. So I don't know. I think it depends on what you want to measure too, right? And what your objectives are.
Yeah, and I feel like different communities and depending on the audience, success is going to be defined differently. Right? So that's, just an added layer to that.
I wonder if some of what, I think that was just Meg, right, who was speaking about the...
No, Bridget. It was Bridget.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I forgot which... Oh, your number switched orders for me on my list. Okay. I wonder if one of the lessons there, if it's something to think about, is like, there is being able to evaluate that the softwares and tools that allowed you to see peak demand, how peak demand may be changing, was then like getting that, then said, okay, this is important, but it's not the whole story, right? Like, how do we go deeper? And is there a role that technology, this is a question for you all, like, do you think there's a role that technology plays, availability of data, availability of software systems that is enabling us to ask harder questions about the element of people and about vulnerability, about community and engagement, that perhaps because the data is more present or the technology is improved, we have an opportunity and a greater sense of the obligation to be going into questions of equity. Or you could be like, no, Beth, that's not what we're doing. Ridiculous. I don't know.
If I can start it off, and I think I'll start off with the narrative. So I just had a meeting recently with the fire department in one of the counties nearby Michigan, and nearby Ann Arbor, I should say, and they reached out to us, and surprisingly, I was really shocked to hear that they wanted to know more about this work that me and my lab do. And they were interested in knowing how they can do better emergency response for the paddlers that go and paddle along the creek that's right in their backyard, basically, in the area that they manage. And for them, it turns out there's just 2 monitoring stations, and they're 28 miles apart by the length of the stream. So anything that's happening in the middle of those 28 miles, they're just like guessing in the dark in terms of like what's going on, or if someone's getting caught. Usually they're responding, they're not being proactive. And so being able to have that additional information in terms of like how fast the water is moving or how high the water level is, especially for these kayakers, it not only helps them figure out where the potential problem spots may be arising, but also becomes an informational tool for the people who are out kayaking or paddling on the creeks and rivers as well, to know if there's like a good situation to be out there or not. Because oftentimes, like after it rains, that's when the water is highest, so that's a great time to go. But that could also be the most dangerous as well. So there's this gap in terms of like, where is it good, where is it bad, and how do you begin to make decisions around that? So just having that data helps to illuminate like what sort of decisions to make around that.
Yeah, and I guess I would build in, some of our experiences. I'm also kind of trying to draw on some examples of, how some of the, the availability of the vulnerability and risk assessment data that we've done that's been provided through a tool, through this Excel adapt. The whole process was I'm thinking, we've been working with West Palm Beach, and obviously the first thing you think about when you think about West Palm Beach is sea level rise. But over the 6 months of analysis, we've also really discovered that they are much more vulnerable to just rainfall-induced flooding and what that means for their stormwater infrastructure and inland. That is much more of an imminent threat, and a lot more vulnerable populations are affected by that than sea level rise. Sea level rise is happening. It's the big thing down there. Everyone knows about it. They're preparing for it. But through the kind of use of this tool and then being able to kind of interact and see where this spatially within their city, where these threats are actually, first where they're exposed and then really where they're vulnerable, was able to see that stormwater issues and flooding through the city really affected their populations differently. And equity was a big part of understanding that and seeing it, kind of in front of them. It's really hard to ignore. It's parts of their city or that they're, developing now, also next to, some really some underserved communities are a real threat and more threat than sea level rise. So I don't know. I feel like there's been some real success in that, in developing tools for at least this one municipality, and I like to think longer term and see, how can it, obviously we're dealing with one client, but there are other communities that need to come to the table and understand the same thing, and kind of building off of what you guys were talking about earlier. It's like everyone needs to come to the table and see this, because solutions are going to be different for the city versus this one little neighborhood over here, and so. But it's getting better. I mean, I think access to this information is really accelerating.
Mm-hmm. I think we should spend a little while talking about the format of the session.
Yeah.
This conversation has used 46 minutes, and we have, so basically we have as long in this planning session as we'll have in the session itself. Do people want to show slides?
I'd be happy to, but I already have slides prepared, so that's easy for me.
I could go either way.
Yeah,
I don't have anything, so.
And I don't really feel like, I feel like if there's just because of the time, I feel like we could have one or two folks that have something that they have some NEMAC visuals. Those are really cool, but I personally feel like the stories of some of the cool visuals and technology and also story, the people, those would be more impactful. But I'm down for whatever.
I would be inclined for the time that we have. This is also the first session of the morning. It's 9 a.m. I think that probably doing a lot of PowerPoints is going to make people just dip right back into their coffee cups. And I think it would be, I would like to see the 5 of you up on a panel, providing these kind of introductions of yourself and your work, and moving towards a conversation. I think it could be cool if you had visuals that you wanted to send me. I could create a slide deck of that, and we could have like a scrolling set of visuals behind you. That would be nice.
That sounds cool to me.
Sure.
Okay. For those, yeah, if you have a visual or have, if it's a visual, either whatever it is, send me 2 slides that capture some essence of your work. And we'll see if we can just kind of have those in the background that you might then reference. And send me your logo, because we'll make sure, or send me your slide and make sure your logo's on each of the slides. And so then, as those are scrolling, you can make sure people understand which group they're associated to.
Beth, I had a
yeah, go ahead.
First thing at 9 a.m. Is that Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember.
It's not till Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
It got moved.
It was moved. It was unceremoniously moved from Tuesday to Wednesday.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone still? It's now scheduled for Tuesday morning. Or, I'm sorry. It's now scheduled for Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., 9 to 10 a.m. And I know that, Meg, you're going to have to leave a little early, so we'll put you on, make sure that one of your chairs is on the end. And
I also have a 10 a.m. meeting, but it's down the hall, and I can be late to it. So it works for me.
Okay.
So I have an 8 a.m. What time do you want us to be there?
Right.
Sorry, all your Asheville locals are really problem children here.
Yeah, I know, you are. You could just do your meetings from the Collider. I would say 8:45, but I understand if you can't, if you get there, let's be ready to start at 9.
Definitely. I was thinking 8:45 to aim for, but I just wanted to check in.
Since no one's going to bring slide decks that they suddenly need to have updated, I think that you're just going to get mic'd up. So if this goes the way that it did last year at this event, they'll have a little sort of green room off to the side of where the presentations will be. And there will be a team there who will be able to mic you up with lavaliers. And then ideally we'll just have chairs up on the platform, up on the stage that everybody can sit in. So, it's not going to take a lot of time to prep up.
Beth,
yeah.
Are you thinking of having a few just leading questions initially or some main questions we should try to hit during our discussion? Would that be something we should try to do? Or do you want to freeform it a little, kind of like we just did a little, or go from our introductions?
Well, I think that what I'd like to introduce is that we're going to hear about how the 5 of you are thinking about technology and the integration of technology and equity, or advancing equity with technology solutions at a variety of scales. And I think that we will go from, this is my thinking, is that we would go from I think that Brandon, you going first as somebody who has an emerging technology that is seeking applications and thinking broadly about where that application could take place, would go well to go first. I would then think that Karen, your Well, let's see. I actually maybe would have Meg go next, who's working at a regional scale and thinking about what she's seeing across the Southeast region and the programs that are being implemented through the Sustainable Development Fund. And then go to Karen to talk about what this looks like in a couple individual cities. Then to Nikisha to talk about communities, because your conversation, Karen, about looking more about data and thinking about the social vulnerability indicators that are becoming part of the Accelerator tool.
Acceladapt. Yeah, you got it. You're good.
Would then flow into Nikisha talking about what does that balance look like then in the neighborhoods and communities controlling their own story and solutions and needs.
Mhm.
And then we'll go down to the household level. And I think that story of the utilization of technology for weatherization, and then the kind of realizing what data is usable and accessible for a homeowner as they're going through this process. Does that order, how does that order sound to all of you?
I like it.
That sounds great. You really captured the essence of the scales we were all talking about, I think.
So are we thinking, yeah, I think that sounds super. This is Meg. Are we thinking like, you know, obviously we want to have folks ask questions, like do we need to be like 2 to 5 minutes each, or like how do you see that happening in terms of interaction with whoever else is in the room and the audience?
Yeah, I think that 5 minutes, I think 2 to 5 minutes each for an introduction of your work and relationship to technology and equity. I would be very happy then to have a couple questions on tap to ask to the panel. They could be these questions that I just asked you about, does technology, is it, you know, is evolving technology helping to bring forward conversations about equity and maybe what the interaction is with technologies and equity. Or you could each send me a couple questions that you think should be asked, and I can pick them out and send them out to everyone ahead of time. Or if there's other questions right now that we want to tee up, and I can ask those. I think we want, you know, time for the audience to engage. I think we definitely should make them be engaged.
Just as someone who goes to a lot of conferences or whatnot, I find the most beneficial when there is audience participation in some way. I personally don't like when people are talking at me. I want to feel like I'm able to participate in the conversation in some way. So I agree with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I would also be very happy for us to take this whole session and, you know, the very opening of it be everybody just got in the room, get in your seat, settle down with your coffee, turn to the person next to you, and I want you to take 2 minutes and introduce yourself and introduce what your like technology challenge or equity challenges that you're facing in your work and how you might be able to resolve, you know, like how equity and technology are resolving in your own work, in your own organizations, and have them sort of talk for 2 minutes, like 3 minutes, just with one another, and then start with a quick popcorn that is, you know, can somebody tell us, like, what did your partner tell you that they're working on? Like, what was your partner's challenge? Like, what's the story? Just to get them, like, talking and up and from the very beginning engaged. And then they'll hear from the 5 of you and then back to them to then kind of set into their minds, okay, this is the, you know, these are these levels of expertise that are here, and these are now the questions that I brought to my head that I know I want to ask them.
Sure.
I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
That's something that I feel like is sorely missing from a lot of conferences.
Okay.
And I like the term popcorn.
Do we want to like a specific hashtag for our session? So like if people have comments or feedback, like we can easily find it like on our social media outlets.
That's probably terrific. And that's more technology than I ever think of bringing to a session organization. Yes. Can you make us up a hashtag, Nikisha?
Yeah, I'll think about a good one for. I don't know. Does anybody have any other ideas of what would be a good one for our session? If not, like we can think about it between now and Wednesday. We can kind of circulate that around in our email chain.
So I want to respect everyone's time. Will you all be at the conference on Tuesday, on the day before?
I will be.
I'll be there in the afternoon.
Yeah. I'll be there in the afternoon.
Okay. Then I've taken notes. I'm going to send these notes out kind of raw. It'll be a more higher likelihood that you'll get them. I'll also work then on cleaning them up and create a session kind of run of show for us. Nikisha will work on thinking of a hashtag, and Brandon, you seem like you were like, oh, I could do that too. You had a kind of nodding positivity too. So, and then we'll definitely connect. Either I'll connect one-on-one with each of you on Tuesday as I see you, or I'll try to pull you all together sometime on Tuesday just for us to all get to meet face-to-face before we get onto the stage together.
Okay, great.
Is everyone pretty comfortable? I know this is a little loose still, but is it comfortable enough?
Yeah, I like it. I think it'll flow well.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for organizing us, Beth. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No problem. It's my
Thank
pleasure.
you.
It's wonderful to meet. I know that several of you I've never had a chance to meet before, so I'm thrilled to get to know you and to hear what you're working on and get to hear all about it again in a few more days when we can be together in person. Have a great afternoon and enjoy.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.